What would each league champion be in real life? This video was requested by Hector Ferreira, who's an Ascendant tier member. Much love, man. You have no idea how much this helps me. Aatrox would 100% be an excellent butcher. Not just because of his skill with blades, but also because he already has experience cutting meat from way before the rework. There's even one of his voice lines that straight up proves my point.
So, I'm Aatrox. I'm a transcendental being trapped inside cutlery. What's your deal?
Ari would be a streamer or an influencer. I can easily imagine her going live playing games, using those cat ear headphones, doing cosplay at events, and being a super popular streamer overall. Akali would probably be an instructor of some kind of martial art, gymnastics, or parkour, something where she could be agile and athletic. Or if she went down a music path, she'd be a rapper, just like she is in the KDA skin. Taking advantage of that grappling hook and Akshan's taste for danger, I can easily see him being a professional climber or mountaineer, climbing mountains and doing insanely dangerous trails purely for the adrenaline. He'd show up in one of those Instagram videos where you open the comments and someone says, "The best part is that you're not forced to do this." Or he'd be a Bollywood actor, starring in those Indian movies where completely absurd stuff just keeps happening. Alistar would be a bull, probably extremely jacked from some kind of experiment to create a Super Bowl or something like that, whose only job would be producing with a bunch of cows. And Bessa would be an heiress of a rich military family, and would just take over the family business, living a life of luxury basically since the day she was born. Amumu would be homeless and living under a bridge. Or a child with a highly contagious disease, forced to live in the hospital without contact, isolated in a room or something like that, with only a window that lets him watch all the other children playing, knowing they'll never get to live that life. Anivia would do really well working at an ice cream shop, or some place that sells cold stuff, or I don't know, she'd just be a random ice bird. Annie is 5 years old, she'd be in kindergarten. Aphelios would be an excellent sniper or weapons specialist in the army, while his sister Alun would be a pastor or a very devoted church follower, going around preaching in the places where Aphelios would be fighting. Ash would be a great leader, like the CEO of a massive company or a political leader. Aurelian Sol would be an astronomer or an astrophysicist professor, and he would definitely be that guy who thinks he knows everything and never accepts the opinion of someone who actually knows more than him. Aurora would be a calm, curious research biologist who loves studying and spending lots of quiet time focused on her research. Azir would 100% be one of those Middle Eastern oil prince tycoons who owns an engineering company that builds insanely expensive luxury buildings in Dubai. Bard would be a street musician who plays literally any song that anyone pays him to play. Belveth would be an investor who owns a multi-million-dollar company and is extremely greedy and egocentric. She'd love buying and absorbing other companies to become even more powerful, basically like Disney. Blitzcrank would be a demolition engineer or garbage truck. Bran would be a pyromaniac or an employee at a crematorium. Braum would be a super nice school security guard who takes care of everyone. And in his free time, he'd be a volunteer, teaching gym classes to people who can't train on their own or helping the elderly people. Briar would be a patient in a rehabilitation at a psychiatric hospital, or a food influencer, like those ones who eat giant lobsters. Caitlyn would be a private detective or a forensic investigator, or even a police chief, just like how she is in the Runeterra universe. Camille would be a secret agent or maybe a surgeon. Cassiopeia would be an excellent herpetologist, which is someone who studies reptiles and amphibians. Cho'Gath would be a food critic, or a monster movie stunt double, or even a very elegant aristocrat. Corky would be a pilot, and don't even ask where he was in 1942. Darius would be a military general, or a basketball player. Diana would be a dedicated astronomer, focused on selenography, which is the study of the moon's phases. Dr. Mundo would be a doctor who had his medical license revoked and now works illegally, but if that goes wrong, he could always go back to being a great economist. Draven would be a reality show host or a model. Echo would 100% be a mechanical engineer, an inventor who's always looking to ways to help people who need it the most. Elise would be a pest control worker who secretly releases the same pests she captures so she can just have more work later and make more money. Evelyn would have an OnlyFans. Ezreal would be an archaeologist, straight up Indiana Jones style. Fiddlesticks would be one of those horror movie actors who specialize in playing creepy roles in multiple films, like Javier Botet, the guy who played Slenderman, Mama, the homeless creature from It, the girl from Wreck, which is actually the best horror movie ever, and also the crooked man from The Conjuring. Fiddlesticks would basically be that kind of actor. Fiora doesn't even need an explanation, she would absolutely be a fencing instructor. Fizz would be a lifeguard who saves absolutely no one and only cares about having fun at the beach. Galio would be one of those living statue street performers who stand completely still all day in one pose, and when you give them money, they suddenly move and do a little dance. Gangplank would be a smuggler, the captain of an illegal merchant ship, or maybe just an orange seller. Garen would be a member of some kind of elite security force or just straight up military. Nar would be someone's very temperamental little dog. One moment he's adorable, and the next he bites someone because he randomly got mad. Gragas would be a craft beer producer, or just that drunk old guy who lives at the bar. Graves would be something like a thug, security for criminal events, or just a loan shark. Gwen would be a fashion designer or a seamstress, or even a hairstylist. Hecarim, since he runs so much, could easily be a marathon runner, or if you consider that the one doing the running is actually the horse, then he'd be the jockey. Heimerdinger is an easy one, a university professor of physics or engineering, an inventor, or honestly, all that at the same time. Wei would be an artist, illustrator, graphic designer, fueled by energy drinks, a sad boy who takes commissions on Twitter. Alawi, if you look at our devoted side, would be a religious minister, but if you look at our brute strength side, she'd be a bodybuilder or just a personal trainer. Irelia would obviously be an artist, a choreographer, and a professional dancer. Ivern would be a gardener or a landscaper, or just some old stoner dude, honestly. Janna would be a meteorologist or a weather girl on TV. Jarvan IV would be a member of the British royal family, or just the son of a politician. Jax would be like that homeless fighter from Bully. Why? I don't know. Jax just gives off this vibe of being some kind of alien who knows karate and can beat you up with literally any random metal pipe he finds on the ground. Jace would easily be a scientist, the inventor type, more specifically an experimental physicist. Jin would be a film director, a photographer, or anything related to performing arts. And it's worth mentioning that in his free time, he's secretly a serial killer. Jinx, if you look at her artistic side, could be a pyrotechnician or graffiti artist. But if you focus on her crazy inventor side, she'd be a weapons tester, designing high caliber firearms and testing them to see if they actually work. Cassante would either be a hunter who goes deep into the jungle and all that crazy stuff, or just a chill personal trainer. And I know Cassante's pretty chill, but the only thing more chill than him is you. That's right, you. Especially if you click on that subscribe button, or like, or comment on the video. If you're really enjoying the content, consider becoming a member to get access to a bunch of cool benefits, like choosing video topics and getting early access to videos. Let's move on to the next champion on the list, Kaisa, who I honestly have no idea what she'd be. The only personality Riot gives Kaisa is that she's hot and that's it. So maybe she'd have an OnlyFans and post some extremely weird and bizarre monster and tentacle content. That said, in the Star Guardian universe, it says that Kaisa loves studying geometry, so maybe she'd actually follow a career in that field. Callista, if you consider her skills while she was alive, would work in national security for country. If you think it makes more sense for her to be dead, she'd be a mercenary who kills for revenge. Karma would be a spiritual guru or a quantum coach who sells courses. Karthus would be a funeral singer. Kassadin would be a Bedouin desert guide. Katarina would be a mercenary or a secret agent. Kale would be a prosecutor. Kane would be a criminal, and Ross would be his partner in crime. Kennen would be an electrician. Kha'Zix would be an etymologist or pest exterminator. Kindred would literally be death itself, coming to collect souls and take them to the afterlife. Or they'd just be an average worker making minimum wage. Kled would be a redneck farmer and a war veteran who sleeps on his porch. And every time someone gets close, he starts yelling, "Get off my property." Kog'Maw would be an ugly little creature that's somehow cute at the same time, created in the lab of a mad scientist. A perfect real-life example of that is a pug. LeBlanc would be a Discord e-girl who scams idiots, or just a regular politician, honestly. Lee Sin would be a Muay Thai instructor, or a martial arts instructor in general, or just straight up a monk. Leona would be an extremist religious leader. Lilia, if you look at the dream side of her, would be an amazing sleep psychology therapist, but if you look at her Fae side, she'd be a florist. Lysandra would be a fanatical old religious woman who runs a cult. Lucian would be a police officer or a private detective. Lulu would be a child with synesthesia, or just a patient in a mental institution who thinks she talks to fairies. Lux would be a fashion model or a best-selling book author. Malphite would literally be Mount Everest. Malzahar would be a cult leader who scams his followers to steal their money and commit tax fraud. Maokai would be a landscaper who takes extremely good care of his little plants. Master Yu would be a fencing instructor and a martial arts instructor or a monk. Mel would be a marketing executive or a politician who denies her privileged background, fights for underprivileged causes, and is very philanthropic. Milia would be a little kid who's still in school but dreams of becoming a veterinarian and takes care of stray animals. Misfortune would be the owner and businesswoman behind a maritime fleet, or a bounty hunter. Mordekaiser would be a rock guitarist or a dictator. Morgana, unlike her sister, would be a public defender or a social worker, or a food critic. Neferi would be an alpha of a pack of wild dogs. Nami would be a marine biologist or a swimming instructor. Nasus would be a librarian or very studious teacher. Nautilus would be one of those salvage divers who can recover valuable cargo from rivers and the ocean, almost exactly like what he used to do back when he was still alive in in the Runeterra lore. Nico would make a great theater actress, cosplayer, or a street mime who does body painting. Nidalee, because of all her experience in the wild, would be a trail guide or a veterinarian. Neela could be one of those ghost or creature hunters from YouTube videos, since in the lore she's hyper-focused on fighting monsters and wanting to be a hero. Maybe she'd want to prove all this stuff is real and actually capture a demon or something, who knows. Nocturne would be a robber who cuts the power to a house before breaking in. Nora would be a retired elderly librarian with a bunch of cats. Nunu would just be a preschool kid who has a stuffed animal called Willem that he sees as his big imaginary friend. Olaf, because of his obsession with dying, would probably be a stunt pilot or a stunt double who loves doing extremely dangerous stunts. Oriana would be a ballerina. Ornn would be a blacksmith, specialized in metallurgy, or an engineer. Pantheon would be an Olympic javelin thrower or a military trainer. Poppy would be a talent scout. Pike would be a fisherman who goes into those underwater cages with a harpoon to hunt great white sharks. Or if you only look at his killer side, he'd just straight up be a hitman. Kiana would be an influencer blogger who thinks she's the center of the universe. One of those people who keeps trying to pull rank everywhere, even though she doesn't actually have that much influence or that many followers. Quinn would be a military scout or drone pilot. Rakan would be a professional dancer. Rammus would be a Hot Wheels car. Rek'Sai would be an aquarium shark. Rel would be a girl who studies equine science and enjoys caring for and training horses. Or she'd be a metallurgist. Renata Glask would be a CEO of a multinational pharmaceutical company that also sells cosmetics. Renekton would be an owner of an Australian zoo, like Steve Irwin. Rengar would be a bounty hunter or a safari guide. Riven, in her lore, was a farmer for a while, so technically that job makes sense for her since she just wants peace. But she could also be a military veteran traumatized by war who now just wants a regular job and a quiet life. Rumble would be a junkyard mechanic. Rise would be a professor who either barely talks during class or spends the entire lecture telling stories about his own life and completely forgets to teach the subject. Samira, purely by style, would be a model or an actress, but because of her addiction to adrenaline, she'd probably have a really risky job, like doing action movies without a stunt double, or some kind of dangerous performance job like a circus acrobat. Sedrani would be a professional rodeo athlete. Senna would be a detective or a police officer like Lucian, but way less rigid. He'd be the super serious and flexible cop, while she'd be calmer, and would calm him down when things get heated. Seraphine would be an influencer and also sings and makes music, kinda like Taylor Swift, Sabrina Carpenter, and that whole vibe. Set would be an MMA fighter who fights under the nickname The Boss, like The Rock. Sheikah would be a circus clown or a criminal who dresses up as a clown. Shin would be an excellent surgeon or a leader of some unknown Asian religion. Shyvana, judging by her relationship with Jarvan, could be his personal bodyguard. Singe would be a chemist or a pharmacist, operating out of some sketchy alley. Sion would be an American football player because of his ultimate. That alone explains everything. Or a construction worker because of his brute strength. One of those guys who's addicted to work and keeps going non-stop even if he's basically dead. Sivir would be a pizza delivery driver, or just straight up a mercenary or bounty hunter. Skarner would either be a geologist or the mascot of a crab company. Smolder would be the mascot of a soccer team or something like that. Sona, if you look at our supportive side, could be a music therapist. Or if you focus on our artistic side, she'd be an orchestra conductor. Soraka would be an extremely kind soul who just takes care of everyone, so she'd be a doctor or a nurse who works for free to help people. Swain would be a military strategist who pulls off a coup d'etat, or the CEO of an information technology company that collects all of its users' data. Silas would be an anarchist, a social activist, or a revolutionary. Syndra, because of her negative attitude, would be the type of therapist who desperately needs a therapist herself. Tom Kench would either be a renowned chef or a loan shark. Talia, if she were an engineer, just imagine how much land she'd completely fill with buildings. Talon would be an actual assassin, or a super edgy guy who thinks he's the main character of Assassin's Creed and acts like it. Basically, when you watched Death Note for the first time and started identifying with Kira. Tarek would be an actor and a model who's also super philanthropic and donates to every possible cause to help people. Timo, because of his experience as a scout, would be an excellent tour guide, or an actual scout. And in his free time, he'd probably be smuggling mushrooms across countries' borders. Thresh would be a boss of an office that traps people in abusive contracts when they quit, forcing them to work until they completely burn out. Tristana, because of her impulsive personality and the fact that she already kind of has a worker-themed skin, would be a firefighter. Trundle would be a very cocky troublemaker. Tryndamere would be Ash's trophy husband. Twisted Fate would be a professional poker player. Twitch would be a sewer rat or a pest exterminator. Udyr would be a martial arts master who, in his free time, works as a veterinarian. Urgot would be a prison guard who tortures inmates. Varus would be an Olympic archer. Vayne would be a billionaire who fights crime at night in her spare time. Vigar would be a super edgy kid or teenager who has watched way too much anime and now acts like the villains he likes and thinks he's the protagonist. Vel'Koz would be a math professor. Vex, judging by her personality, would be a gothic fashion blogger who complains about literally everything. Vi would either be a police officer working alongside Caitlyn or an underground boxing fighter. Viego would be a widowed monarch. Maybe he'd be a part of an actual European royal family. Victor would be a robotics engineer and a philosopher in his free time. Vladimir would be a hematologist, which is the type of doctor who studies blood. Volibear would be the Coca-Cola polar bear mascot. Warwick would be a bar owner who became a hardcore pet dad. Or maybe he'd just be the pet himself. Who knows? Wukong would be a failed comedian who ended up becoming a monk. Zaya would be a dancer who performs as a duo with Rakan, and she'd specialize in those knife-throwing performances. Zerath would be a frost-free Electrolux 2-door refrigerator. Xin Zhao would be a secret agent. Yasuo would be the unsuccessful alcoholic son of the family. Yone would be the successful sober son of the family. Yorick would be a gravedigger. Yumi would be Nora's pet cat who ended up running away. Yunara would be a yoga instructor. Zahin would be an exorcist. Zack would be an amoeba, basically a slime. Zed would be a martial arts master or an agent. Zeri would be an electrical engineer. Ziggs would be a demolition specialist or a pyrotechnician. Zillion would be an old guy who sits on a park bench telling stories to anyone who sits down to chat with him. Zoe would be a mischievous kid who repeated kindergarten because she skipped class all the time. And lastly, Zyra would be a botanical engineer. And that's basically it. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next video.